Before we start the show today, I want to talk with you about my new ebook, How to Create a Powerful Email Newsletter, a comprehensive guide for creatives. An email newsletter is the number one best way to drive sales to your shop if you have a creative business or any sort of creative endeavor. And to find out kind of a firsthand example, I talked to a creative business owner who has recently started an email newsletter that has totally been transformative for her.
My name is Cody Bachman, and I upcycle fabric into fun toy storage solutions for kids and stuffed monsters. And you can find me at luaned.com. For the first 4 years of my business, I didn't have an email newsletter until I read your article. And then I was like, maybe I should try this. My newsletter in 2014, I launched it January 2nd of 2014. And since launching it, it is the source of about 60% of my purchases.
That's amazing. So
yeah.
60% of the people who are coming to your shop and actually buying something are coming from the newsletter.
Now I'm selling out like within an hour to 3 hours of every stocking. So I know that starting a newsletter has been a really wise decision.
Create a powerful email newsletter just like Cody did. My new ebook will show you how to identify a goal for your newsletter, figure out how frequently to send it, how to build your list and brand your newsletter, and also what to put in it that will actually make your subscribers look forward to receiving it. You can find my ebook at my website, walshynaps.com. And now on to the show. Welcome to episode 48 of the Wall She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today I'm visiting Durham, North Carolina, and I'm at the headquarters of Spoonflower, the largest marketplace of surface designs by independent artists all over the world. I'm excited to be talking with the co-founder of Spoonflower, Stephen Fraser. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been at Spoonflower through its entire life as a company, and that's around 7 years now.
That's right.
Right? Okay. So describe what Spoonflower looks like right now. I mean, we're sitting here. It's pretty amazing. I just took a tour. And how many employees do you have? And just kind of give people a sense of, what does it look like? What does the space look like? And what does your production level look like right now?
So Spoonflower today is in an office park in Durham, North Carolina, right on the edge of RTP, which is Research Triangle Park, sort of a nice wooded suburban office park. You walk through the door and you see a lobby that has examples of Spoonflower products, including our wallpaper, lots of fabric, gift wrap, lots of things actually, either made and designed or designed by Spoonflower customers. So there are examples of plush toys and pillows and things in the lobby, some of which we've bought from the Etsy shops of Spoonflower customers, and some of which we've just printed and put up. We've had a sofa and chairs covered with designs bought from the Spoonflower marketplace. There is this is dear to my heart. There's a ceramic deer head covered with Spoonflower fabric from the Etsy shop Near and Dear, which and you yourself can go there and choose your own ceramic animal head, from a rhino to a buck, and specify any Spoonflower marketplace design, and they will cover it with that design in fabric for you. The Spoonflower marketplace is well represented in our lobby, and the word Spoonflower is on the wall in the door. There's actually a Google virtual tour of our office for people who want to have that experience themselves. To the right of the lobby is a room we call the Spoonflower Greenhouse, which is a community space where we host quilt guild meetings and sewing classes and craft nights and fun things that people in the community here in our local area are invited to participate in for free. And we also have staff meetings there and yoga classes and craft nights and that kind of thing. And then after you come through the lobby, you're in an office, the center of which is a huge print room, which is surrounded by glass windows so people can see what's happening inside it. And inside the print room are many printers of different shapes and sizes, almost all of them running fabric, some of them running some wallpaper and gift wrap. And the room is humidity controlled, and there are lots of air filters. It's noisy when you go in there, but there are no nasty smells. It's an environmentally friendly print room. But that print room operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there are people in there all the time, 3 shifts, and it really is the heart of our business. Outside the print room, there's a busy floor operations area where people are cutting fabric and folding it and putting it on shelves and packing it up and sending it to people elsewhere in the world. They're also, examining the fabric, looking for flaws in case we have to reprint something, and signing the pack slips, usually with friendly and positive messages to the people who are ordering fabric from us. And then in the very front of the office, we have our customer service staff and marketing team, and we have an R&D department as well.
What is R&D?
R&D for us are the people responsible for figuring out ways to make our printers work better, to find better ways to print, and that includes finding better ways to reproduce color. Also, inks that are as wash fast and bright as any inks that are available. So, the way you achieve that is partly kind of with technology and partly with chemistry. So they're researching different products that might help us improve our printing process. And they're also looking at, new printers and new processes that we might employ. They actually stay very, very busy. Our R&D department is, which is, something when we started Spoonflower we never expected to have, but our R&D department is really crucial to the whole business. Yes, and unless they go unsung, our engineering department is in a corner of the office, and that's a hardworking team of people who write the code that supports our site and create new features. And one bit of trivia, about our engineering team is it consists almost exclusively of folks who came here work cutting fabric and printing fabric. So most of the people who work at Spoonflower are people who like to make things, who love design. Some of them are just artists who are kind of attracted to the creative environment, and some of them are folks who have businesses, making and selling handbags or designing clothing or that kind of thing on the side. So they came to Spoonflower because they love what we do, and they're attracted to the whole idea. And then they have, once they got here, sort of been spun out into different parts of the business based partly on their interests and their aptitudes. And most of our engineers are not people who started out as engineers, so we actually taught them to write code. The first prerequisite was being a Spoonflower customer.
Right, a Spoonflower person.
Yeah.
No, I like that. It was really neat to take the tour, and I was really impressed by, you have these 2 new printers that are just enormous, that are made from an Israeli company, and it sounded like they were almost custom made for you. I mean, or you were one of maybe their first, you were one of their first corporate clients, shall we say? There was a lot of back and forth between you were testing them and using them and them improving them over time.
Yeah, that company is called Kornit, and they're a company that has a huge amount of expertise in printing T-shirts and building printers for the T-shirt industry. And they decided to get into the business of textile printing, roll-to-roll textile printing, and they designed this printer, which, as you point out, is very large. I could park my car inside it probably. And they designed it really to do almost exactly what we're doing, which is to be able to do these very short runs of digitally printed fabric. And it's a far cry from the printers we started out with, but we've been sort of transitioning to these big expensive printers. But yes, as you say, I think we were the first customer. We bought the first one, and we're continuing to work closely with that company to kind of develop that technology and help make it more mature and help them kind of understand the market. But it's been brilliantly successful. The fabric, not all of the fabric that we send out the door each day is printed on one of those printers, but within a year or so, I'm hoping all or very close to all of our fabric is printed on one of those printers, and the color is great, and the wash fastness that those printers are able to produce is a big improvement over what has been possible historically with our particular method of printing.
I feel like the wash fastness was maybe a pain point for a while. Am I right about that? Was that something that was a difficult challenge to sort of surmount?
Yeah, I would say that for a lot of applications that is a major pain point, and apparel being sort of the most primary one. But just to sort of back up for folks who are interested in the details of how we print, I'm going to simplify a little bit for the sake of explanation. You can add color to fabric through a dye-based process where you're bringing color down into the fiber. And when I say fabric, I'm going to talk just about natural fibers for a minute. So with cotton, you can use a dye-based process where you're drawing the color into the fiber. And to do that, you've got to have some chemistry, to sort of catalyze the process of drawing the fabric in, and then you've got to activate it with steam or heat somehow to make the color pop, and then of course you've got to rinse out any extra dye. And it is possible to digitally print with dyes, but that's not what we do. If you were doing dye-based digital printing on cotton and linen and silk, you would need to chemically pre-coat all that fabric before you printed it. And then after you print it, you'd have to steam it. And then after you steamed it, you'd have to wash and dry it before you could send it to anyone. So that's a pretty intensive process. And, from a sort of ecological standpoint, has a pretty big footprint. You almost need a conventional textile facility to do that, what they call wet processing, because you've got wastewater and other things to deal with. I mean, digital printing, and any way you cut it is more efficient than mass producing things. But that dye-based process still, is a pretty big process from the standpoint of electricity and water and chemicals and waste and all that kind of thing. But when we started Spoonflower, partly because we wanted to develop a simpler, cleaner process, and partly because we were in fact somewhat simple-minded in our understanding of what was possible, we were looking for something that just allowed us to print and pretty much ship the fabric. And so we used a chemistry called pigments, which is the other way to add color to fabric. And pigments are like paint, and they just kind of sit on the surface of the cotton. And your blue jeans are typically dyed using pigments. And just like blue jeans, pigment over time cracks and wears and fades. So you get a lot of color loss with pigment. It is most vulnerable to what's called crocking, which is where you're rubbing the fabric against itself, and little particles of color come off. So we started Spoonflower using pigments. Many people tried to talk us out of it, but to us it was the process that made the most sense. And the downside, we print the fabric using the pigments, and then we have to heat it, which activates a binder that's in the pigments and the ink, and that makes the fabric wash fast, but it doesn't make it immune to that crocking and fading that is characteristic of pigments. And so for some people, especially people making apparel, that's a big downside to our fabric. It's not if you're making art quilts.
Right, that aren't going to be really heavily washed and used. Yeah,
that's right. And it's using pigments is a big plus if you're making like curtains or decorative pillows, because pigments, unlike dyes, don't fade in the sunlight, or they fade to a much smaller extent. So it's a downside for some. and not for others. And then the other thing that's worth noting is, pigments, might fade on a very bright, heavily colored fabric, and the fading might not be noticeable at all on another print. Really depends from design to design. But any way you cut it, that if you were looking at sort of pros and cons of pigments, the biggest con is that crocking and fading. And the fabric that we're printing using these new printers from Kornit is far less prone to crocking and fading than any of the other technologies that we've tried. So it's a super exciting bit of progress.
The cutting edge of digital printing.
Yeah, it's
textile printing. Yeah,
it's been great, and yes, it's not, life on the cutting edge is not always the easiest, but
I'm sure that's true.
As our customers know, but I guess sort of the important thing from my standpoint, is that Spoonflower is always improving. We're always looking for whether it's a feature on the website, or a process on the back end. We're always looking for ways to improve what we do.
Right, and it's a process.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely. So you began college at Durham College in 1998, and then transferred to UNC Chapel Hill, and in 91, and graduated in 93 with a degree in English.
That's right.
And I wonder what you imagined you'd be doing as a career at that time, because I can't imagine it's this, because this wasn't invented yet. So where did you see yourself? I mean, did you see yourself in an entrepreneurial setting? Was that always part of what you were, or how did you envision it to your future?
Yeah, that is funny. I think I imagined myself writing for a living. Particularly, I worked off and on as a journalist during my 20s, and but about the last thing that I imagined was that I would be in business in any form. That was just not the way I thought of myself. So this is where I am now is quite a surprise to me, and would be to my parents as well if they were alive. What's funny, my father was an entrepreneur. He ran an advertising agency for a little over 30 years in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was a very small agency, but he was the kind of person who didn't do very well working for someone else. And it turns out I'm probably like him in that respect. I'm just really better under my own steam than I am working in someone else's box. Right.
So, I feel like you've had a kind of a career prior to Spoonflower on this sort of internet-based print-on-demand setting, so sort of after the journalism, but before Spoonflower. And I just wanted to see if you could describe briefly your time prior to founding the company. Sort of, I know you were at Lulu, and what were your jobs like leading up to this?
Well, my first job in the internet business was at Lulu, and Lulu.com did not start out as Lulu.com. It started out as a business idea from a man named Bob Young, who is the guy who co-founded Red Hat, for people who follow software and open source software. Bob had a big success with Red Hat, and then he sort of tried to figure out what to do next, and he decided that he wanted to put on a technology show, like a place where people could go and have sort of hands-on learning in a technology environment. And he hired a couple of people to help him do that here in the area, one of whom was my Spoonflower co-founder, Gart Davis, who had a background in technology education, which was going to be a big component of this show. And they had a very ambitious time frame for putting on the first of what was to be many shows called Lulu Tech Circus was the name of the endeavor. And Gart, in a big hurry, hired pretty much everyone he knew, and I knew him because I'd been to a Christmas party at his house. So I fell into that category of people
Gart knew.
Someone Gart knew, and so I came on board just to sort of help out with this, again, sort of very hurried endeavor of Lulu Tech Circus. and we put on one show in Raleigh, and it was a very intense couple of days. And then Bob, who was behind the whole thing, decided, wow, this show thing is going to lose a lot of money really fast. So he changed his mind about doing the show, and he had this other thing, which was what he called an open source publishing platform, a collaborative publishing platform, which was a bit of software he had bought at sort of a fire sale during the .com crash. And he put Gart and I and a very small crew of other people to work trying to turn that into a business. And we took over the domain lulu.com, and we started trying to figure out what that business was going to be. And what it morphed into was a business that allowed people to publish their own books through the internet and to order, a marketplace where people could order one copy at a time of a book, and it would just be printed on demand. And lulu.com was the first site to do that, to make publishing a book as easy as publishing a blog. Blogs were still pretty new at the time, and right around that time YouTube came along as well. So there was this whole, what they called user-generated content revolution happening, and Lulu brought that revolution to the printed word.
Right, and then Spoonflower brought it to the printed fabric.
Fast forward a few more years, and Gart and I had both left left Lulu.com, and we sat down to talk about, other business ideas. And my wife is someone who buys a lot of fabric and is always making things, and she had mentioned to me one night, that it was sort of frustrating and surprising to her that she couldn't print her own fabric, design her own fabric, because she had an idea for a particular kind of curtains for her house. And so that idea had stuck with me. So when Gart and I sat down, I pointed out, I said, nobody's done this on-demand publishing thing for fabric.
How hard could it be?
How hard could that be? That's right.
Right.
And we decided to just sort of give it a go. Now, neither Gart nor I were rich, but we figured we could create kind of a rough prototype for this site without spending a ton of money and bankrupting our families. And we could do it slowly just to sort of test the concept. And so that's what we did. We created an invitation-only beta site. And
what year was this?
This was 2008.
Okay.
And I think we took the first dollar through that website on like May 24th, and we had the fabric printed at a not-for-profit in Cary, right down the road, Cary, North Carolina, called TC Squared. And we'd take the orders. People could upload a design and check out. There was nothing to browse or see on our website. It was really quite rudimentary.
And you had one printer that was...
We had no printers.
But this nonprofit had one. Right,
yeah.
Okay.
So I would send them the files, and they would print, and then I'd drive over there and pick up the fabric once a week. And Kim and I, after our kids went to bed, would stay up late cutting it on the floor or the dining room table and stuffing it in envelopes and, printing back slips with our home printer. And I'd take it to the post office the next day.
Right.
And we did that, every week for a few weeks until Gart and I, looked at the waiting list of people who wanted to use our website once we actually had a proper website.
Right.
And we said, let's go ahead and do this. And so, we took out a loan and ordered a printer from Korea, which took a few weeks to arrive. And we rented, in the meantime, an old sock mill in downtown Mebane, North Carolina, where the landlord let us rent month to month. And it was a big room. And he said, well, you can rent this whole room, for $1.50 a square foot or something. And we were like, well, we only need half the room. Because, again, we didn't have much money. And so he said, well, how about we put tape down the middle, and that'll be the half of the room. This half of the room you rent. And then if we need the other half of the room, we'll take the tape up and increase the amount we paid him each month. So
Was that scary? I mean, was it scary to be like, all right, we're all in, like we've got customers waiting, and we'll have to just figure this out. We're going to need another printer at some point. This was a whole new frontier.
It was. I think that the really scary moment was, we didn't have any employees at the time, so you're in a room with a big printer, orders are coming in, and you've had someone who installed the printer show you how to use it, but at that point, you've got to print all the fabric, you've got to cut the fabric, you've got to do everything, and up until then, mostly for me, it had been blogging and taking pictures of fabric that was printed and YouTube videos and that kind of thing, and all that I felt pretty comfortable with. I knew how to do that, but when it came down to it was just us, and we had to create a factory. That's when it really began to dawn on me that we had a lot to learn. But
do you feel like, you came in as a novice really in the sewing world? I mean, your wife sews, but you didn't come from a textile, background. You came from a tech background, from a journalism background, but not from, a sewing background. And I wonder whether you feel like being a novice in some way. I mean, you were an internet marketer, you had that part of it, but was like an advantage, sort of not really having your fingers on the the way that the current fabric industry was working, and sort of, just coming in and being like, we've got an idea, we'll do it this way, without really being in the industry for a long time prior. Did you feel like then somewhere there was an advantage there?
I do. I mean, I sometimes joke that we were very much protected by our own ignorance. So, there was some amount of advantage in not knowing what we were getting ourselves into, and so we were not able to become overly intimidated. But, I also think, yes, we brought a naive perspective to whether or not this was a good idea or whether it was practical. And that actually proved to be very helpful. So there were a lot of people in the fabric industry, or more specifically just kind of in the printing industry,
right,
who knew that these textile printers existed and, had thought about this, but they, for a variety of reasons, thought putting it on the internet would be a bad idea, because they didn't really, I think the thinking for them was, well, who would really want a lot of small jobs? I'd rather have customers who, are in the industry and know how to prepare their files, and, we can provide a lot of value if we, only have customers in the fashion industry or customers who are prototyping products, and they'll pay, $100 and more per yard for the fabric, and we can charge that. The last thing they wanted were a lot of quilters. I mean, people actually said that to us, like, oh, thank goodness, people who already had printing businesses were saying, thank goodness, these quilters call me and I don't know what to do with them. And, the last thing they wanted was to print, a quarter yard of fabric for someone who didn't know how to use Photoshop.
Right, but that's what you do.
Those were the people we wanted to build the whole business around.
Right.
And they were people like my wife Kim, and not only did we want to build the business around them, but we got really excited by those people and what they were doing and the creativity that they were bringing to the process. And
right.
And so I really think in that way we were just like our customers. We kind of brought our own naive enthusiasm and, our a lack of fear about trying something new.
And tackling this customer base that really nobody else wanted to deal with. And that's like the unmet market right there.
Right.
That's
right.
where you start to see, well, then we'll deal with them. We'll help them figure out how to tile a design and how to upload it and, how to do this. We'll be the one who will do this and print a yard for their little project. And
yes.
Yeah, right.
And like many of the people, I think, in the DIY movement, we really were figuring it out as we went along. We had an idea of what a successful company, a successful, sophisticated company like Spoonflower would look like. We weren't exactly sure how to get there, but we just jumped in and through trial and error.
Was there a turning point? I mean, often I feel like in businesses there's a turning point. There's something that happens, whether it's sort of a total catastrophe where you have all these orders and you just can't fill them, and you know something needs to change, or some piece of press coverage, and then we were on Martha Stewart and everything changed. I mean, was there a moment where you're like, this was the turning point when that happened, that we knew this was going to, this was really going to be a thing? We were going to keep going.
There were several.
Yeah.
It's like that. The first one was in January of 2009. And at that point, we had three employees, all of them were part-time, who were helping print and cut fabric. But we only had 2 printers, and neither of them worked very well. So
these were paper printers that you'd kind of tripped up to be fabric printers to a degree.
They were printers, paper, or sort of signage printers, wide format inkjet printers from Japan that actually some technicians in South Korea had modified with textile handling systems, and we were using them, but both of them were terrible. And we could barely get a yard of usable fabric out of them. And but right around that time, at the beginning of January, the New York Times home section, actually it was sort of over Christmas, they called us and they said, we want to do a piece on you in the New York Times in the home section. And we were very excited. And they sent a photographer, and then the story didn't come out. And we called and said, what's going on with the story? And they said, well, our editor said that everyone's already covered you.
You're like, no.
And I said, no. But at that point, a lot of blogs had written about us already. But
they're not the New York Times.
They're not the New York Times. Nobody knew who we were.
Sure.
We were a little ragtag band of people working in this old sock mill. And by the way, I was saying we had 3 part-time employees. We also had Gart and I and our spouses working pretty much full-time. So not, and sometimes our kids, when we could get them in there doing something useful, which wasn't very often. So yeah, we did have lots of help, but no one in our families were getting paid. Anyway, the New York Times, I told them, no, everyone hasn't covered us. We're a brand new company. And they said, oh, okay, and they rescheduled the story. So the story came out around the middle of January, and we were on the cover of the home section. And almost immediately, we started getting calls and getting hit by lots and lots of people. And the big trouble was we couldn't really print the fabric very well. And then the economy at that time was in a recession and had crashed. In between us taking out the lease on our office and the loan to buy our printer in August and January, that was when the economy went in the tank, and the banks were not willing to give us a loan, and we didn't have enough cash to just go out and buy new printers. And by the way, when we weren't sure if we bought new printers if they'd work any better than the ones that we had. And so we were going through bank application after application and getting turned down. And we got a grant from a local group called ncidea.org that provides some money to about 12 different startups a year
in North Carolina.
Right. And that was hugely helpful. And that got us through a few more weeks, but we really needed a loan from a bank, and finally we found a bank that did give us an SBA-backed loan, and the SBA, as you might remember, was the beneficiary of the stimulus money that was passed right around that time, and they were putting pressure on banks to actually lend it out, and so one bank finally agreed to do that, and we bought, I think, 4 printers. We had to put down 25% of the money for them, and to do that, I took a loan out of home equity, and I think Art did as well, and so we cut, so at that point you're really all in.
Yeah.
So you're on the hook for a big, loan, $100,000 loan, and you've borrowed what equity you have. So fortunately, those printers worked better than the first couple,
right?
And we were kind of up and running. But in between there, with the New York Times and us getting that loan and getting those printers in, our customers were waiting weeks and weeks for us to ship an order. So longer, the queue became longer and longer.
Right.
And it was a really terrible time. We were providing, in that sense, a very bad service, but to our customers. But we were also blogging about it and trying to sort of be transparent and chronicle what was going on.
Right, which does mean a lot.
In the business, and so many of these people, because they had signed up, to the site as a sort of beta prospect, they were just rooting for us.
Right.
So they cut us all this slack. They were very forgiving, and they were rooting for our business to succeed. And I think that was sort of when the real core of the Spoonflower community formed. And thank goodness.
and now you have over 100 employees here, and you've got these two gigantic printers plus a whole lot of other printers going, and times have changed. So are people still rooting for you? I mean, do you feel like out there people are still rooting for you in that way?
I really do. I recognize that the expectations that people have of us are higher, as they should be. They don't expect to have to wait weeks for their fabrics, and they expect us to produce a high quality product, and to be professional in all aspects, and that's certainly as it should be. But I really do, when I go out in the world, I meet people all the time. Even if they weren't Spoonflower customers, they were cognizant of what we were doing from the beginning, and they followed the progress of the company, and they recognize that the service that we've made available has empowered artists from all over the world and makers, artists to tackle a new medium, fabric, that was never accessible or available to them before, and makers to create new products and try out new concepts that they would otherwise never have been able to try. So, people have a lot of respect for the impact that we've had on the world. And in that sense, they're still very much on our side, even though like any business, we sort of stub our toe now and then, and do the wrong thing or send someone a bit of fabric that might be flawed.
Right. I mean, what you're doing is you're helping people create the raw material. And that's something that in fabric, unless you're a weaver, is really hard to do, or a screen printer. This is the raw material that people make things with. And I want to talk a little bit about the marketplace, because Spoonflower's success really is user generated. Mm-hmm. So it's all about the number and the beauty and the type of designs people are creating and uploading and making public, really. All of the fabric that I've bought on Spoonflower has been from the public marketplace that's on the site, where I browse by a certain tag or category, mm-hmm. and purchase fabric that way. And so tell me about the marketplace, and obviously there's also wallpaper now and wrapping paper, so it's not just fabric, but you can have your designs printed on other substrates too. But the marketplace, I think, was always part of the idea. It took maybe a little while to get it up and running. So why have people generate the designs themselves? I mean, why have that be part of it, and have them also be able to profit from it? I mean, everybody who sells a yard is it 10%, I think, of the cost.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a co-entrepreneurial thing going on here as well.
Yeah, I think that really is a crucial part of the vision for Spoonflower, and as you point out, it wasn't possible for us to launch Spoonflower fully formed because our resources were so thin. Gart, my co-founder Gart Davis, was writing all the code at the beginning, and so we had this vision for a place where people could upload and also make their designs available for sale, but that took about 18 months or so to get launched. But that marketplace is what makes Spoonflower more than just a printing service. And what I sometimes describe Spoonflower as like YouTube for fabric. That concept is really important. YouTube came along and displaced a world where there were content producers, NBC, ABC, CBS, that decided what kinds of content people might want to watch, made big investments in it, and put it out there, in very finite channels, and people either liked it or they didn't like it. And YouTube completely turned that on its head by not seeking to curate or control content at all, creating a platform that enabled anyone to distribute their own content. And that started out as just skateboard videos in the case of YouTube, but ended up changing the world. And I don't think any of us could really imagine a world now where someone with a video had no platform where they could make it accessible for other people to watch. And so, textile design is a niche, and you can say, well, fabric design doesn't change the world, but creating a platform that gives artists and product developers, some of them, we might call them crafters, but we can call them also entrepreneurs and product developers, creating a platform where people can create new stuff, put their work out there, and the world can come to it and figure out what it wants to buy. That's the way it should be. That in its small way is how Spoonflower set out to change the world.
Right, and it can be hyper niche, so that only 2 or 3 other people in the world like this particular design, and yet it's still available to everyone. Whereas it doesn't have to have mass market appeal.
That's right. I sometimes use the example. Dog breeds are pretty good examples, because everyone's got some dog breed that they're kind of fond of or crazy about. And if you were somebody who what is the Queen has corgis, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were somebody who really loved corgis, there might be a fabric store probably in the UK somewhere that has some corgi fabric that you could buy, but you'd really have to go looking pretty hard. But if you type corgi fabric into Google at this point, you're going to find 200 plus results on Spoonflower. There's not just one corgi fabric to choose from. There's 200 different designs, and you can order any of them on any of 15 different base fabrics or wallpaper or gifting.
Right.
And so that is a sort of it's one of the things the internet's very good for, right? Is providing ways to sort of consolidate these very narrow slices of interest.
To a worldwide market.
That's right.
Absolutely. So how much of the success of Spoonflower do you think sort of is about timing? I mean, there was, sort of Etsy's success and this DIY maker movement and YouTube, as you talked about, and it almost like rides that wave of Etsy in a way. And I wonder, do you feel like it worked to a degree because of the moment it came along, despite the rough economy in there and other things, but I don't know if it would it work the same way if it started today. I mean, I feel like it came right around the same time it rode the wave of this trend of Etsy and other DIY movements.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to separate timing from something like this, but I very much think of Spoonflower as being part of what I call the Etsy verse. And Etsy grew up partly because of something that eBay did poorly, right? So it was very difficult to look for artisan items on eBay. It was much easier to buy, used auto parts and things like, or collectibles, Star Wars action figures on eBay. But it was a very poor environment for things that were unique or made by hand. And Etsy came along and provided that, but it also was sort of at the forefront of a shift in values toward things that are not mass produced. So I think you can kind of see the same shift in values in terms of how people eat, but it's also how they shop. So people go to first they went to Whole Foods, and now they're going more and more to farmers markets. So they're moving away from, this is perhaps a little overly optimistic, but I think they're moving away from a sort of Walmart kind of world, or at least significant populations of people are choosing to express their values partly by what they buy. So you've got people who are expressing their values through what they make. People have always made things and had hobbies and that sort of thing, but the big difference is now there's significant portions of people who are just buying those things too, choosing to buy them, and that really is an expression of values. And so Spoonflower came along, and a lot of customers, both at the beginning and now, are people who have Etsy shops who are trying to figure out ways to add nuance and expression and individualism, these sort of artisan qualities to things that they're making, whether they're pillows or dolls, or fabric covered ceramic taxidermy, photo taxidermy. So Spoonflower sprang up as another tool in the toolbox for people who are creating that kind of thing. And then to go back to how people spend their money, part of Spoonflower is people who are creating things, but a lot of it is also just people who are buying fabric, right?
Yeah.
But by choosing fabrics that are unique, I'm also kind of expressing a value system, right? I'm choosing to buy fabrics that reflect my particular worldview or niche or aesthetic, instead of just the 15 or 20 fabrics that might be available to me in Target or Walmart or Joann.
And I've always felt that there's, for a significant number of people, shopping on Etsy and shopping on Spoonflower as well is an artistic act in and of itself. So it's an artistic expression just to shop, because that you're shopping from artisan design products that that are sort of very niche and very sort of different from what's on the mass market, and that's artistic in and of itself.
And you're buying directly from a designer too. So in the same way that when you buy, you get this great sense of satisfaction when you buy at the farmers market, because you're actually
handing your cash over to the woman who picked the asparagus.
Yeah, exactly. And when you buy a piece of fabric on Spoonflower, you get a thank you note from the person that designed it.
Right.
And they're like, great, would love to see what you make with it.
Right.
And that kind of connection, is just not possible in the sort of old retail world.
Right, and those relationships are really exciting. I think that's really neat. So in the last couple of years, Spoonflower has done some neat collaborations, I feel like. So you've worked with Creative Bug, a little bit with Skillshare, with Uppercase Magazine, with a shoe company, Milk and Honey Shoes, and there's probably a bunch of other ones that I'm missing. But I'm just interested in this sort of idea of putting the fabrics and what you have to offer out there with these other companies, and what's sort of the strategy behind that and what you've gotten from it.
Yeah, that is a good question. The place that I kind of start when I consider these collaborations is we have this amazing community of designers who use Spoonflower. And these are the people who are creating the artwork. So they may or may not be people who sew and make things. These are really artists and many of them digital artists. But they've sort of formed around Spoonflower. We have a weekly design contest that we do that has a different theme each week, and this truly international community of talented artists have sort of formed around that design contest. And for those people, like, one of the things that they aspire to is licensing their designs out into the world. That's how that's what success looks like for them. They might get a fabric line, but they might also get their stuff licensed on greeting cards, or some other product that's going to get manufactured, turned into something concrete and sold out in the world. So when we started doing these partnership contests, we were really kind of looking for wins for the designer community,
right?
Sort of American Idol kinds of models where anybody can participate in a Spoonflower contest. You don't have to have a portfolio or a resume, and you can just come and try and design fabric. And so we were trying to find opportunities where the community can vote on these designs, but the winner actually gets to go on to some next level of success. And we've done a ton of fun contests and collaborations, as you point out, around that concept. We do one every year called the Fabric 8 contest, where the winner of the contest goes on to have a collection with a fabric company. We've done that contest a few times with Robert Kaufman, and this year I think we'll be doing it with another company that we haven't announced yet, so I'll keep
exciting.
My lips closed until we're ready to announce that. But again, it's not that novel a concept. It is sort of American Idol for fabric design, but for us, it's really about giving these designers an opportunity to be seen and discovered.
Right. And if you think back to what we talked about at the beginning about the printers who were like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I take these quilters off my hands. They are driving me crazy asking for small, print runs of their designs. And you were like, well, we'll serve them. They'll be our clients. And so this is, really serving them, saying to them, you've got talent and skill, and we can help you launch this and make this into something more than it is, and really further your career. So,
well, it really spans all levels, and the starting place for me is always, people say, well, how can I get started in fabric design? Should I go take a Photoshop course or whatever? But I like to start at a much more basic level. Draw something on a piece of paper, scan it, play around with it, cut out different shapes and color pieces of paper and make a collage, and scan that and start trying to create a fabric design. I mean, to me, the root of this is experimentation. And I know a lot of people get intimidated when they come to our site and they see, the contest winners every week, for example, and they don't realize, that those are actually, a lot of them very, very accomplished artists who've been doing this for many years. But to me, it's really important that we have contests, and that we just in general communicate and accessibility. So for people who've never tried fabric design at all,
and you have
give them something they can come and do.
Right, and you have on the website a way for them to tile the design. So, in other words, you might, think to yourself, well, I could never design it because all I know how to do is draw something or take a photo or something like that, but I can't tile it and make a good repeat, and I don't know how to use Photoshop and do all of that stuff. But you actually have built into the software on the Spoonflower site a way for people to experiment with that and to do it and to create what they need to create to make the fabric.
Yeah, that's right. So if, for people who haven't tried it, you could draw, a flower or a face, on a piece of paper, and you could scan it and upload it, and then you can choose repeat options to sort of tile it to fill a whole area of fabric. And we try to do tutorials on the blog that provide these really accessible projects, something you can do with a cell phone camera, for example, or something you can do with a piece of paper. And then we also every now and then have contests that are constrained in that way. Like it has to be designs that were originally drawn with crayons or something like that.
Right, which is neat. All right, so before we end, I usually, toward the end of my show, I ask my guests to recommend something they're enjoying right now. I'm going to put you on the spot because I didn't give you any time to prepare, but something, it could be a tool, it could be a book, it could be a magazine, a website, an app on their phone, or just something that, you would recommend to a creative friend right now. So what are you into at this moment?
Well, that is a good question. I am really taken, as you point out, we just did a collaboration with Creative Bug. And, so I've been really interested in what Creative Bug is doing, and also, what Craftsy is doing, which is another site that offers lots of tutorials for getting into new areas. So I don't have a huge amount of spare time to go out and...
You have 3 daughters as well, we should mention.
I don't have a huge amount of time to go learn stuff, but just in browsing those 2 sites recently in particular, I've been kind of putting together this mental list of things that I would, courses I would really like to take, and new stuff I would really like to try. My wife, for what it's worth, because it is really her creativity that inspired Spoonflower, has gotten really into hat making recently. So she's taken classes and being a milliner, and is continuing to sign up for those classes, and bought supplies, and our house is actually full of hats.
That's amazing.
Amazing, beautiful hats, I should add.
I love that millinery is back. And my husband wears a fedora, and he's obsessed. And he goes to this specialty hat shop in Boston that he loves. So it's back.
I have a feeling there may be a hat shop in our future.
It sounds like it. All right, so where can people find Spoonflower online if they're interested in learning more about the site?
Spoonflower can be found at www.spoonflower.com, and we also have the blog that I mentioned, which has lots of tutorials, at least a couple of tutorials every week, and including also a giveaway that we do each week, which usually has a small but fun prize, craft supplies, free fabric, sometimes crafting books, quilting books, that kind of thing, design books. So that can be found at blog.spoonflower.com. And we're also on Facebook, and we're also on Twitter, and we're on Instagram and Pinterest.
And all is Spoonflower.
All of that is Spoonflower. That's right.
Awesome. Super. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. I really enjoyed talking to you and learned a lot as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great. And you've been listening to the Walshing Apps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg, and I invite you to visit my blog, walshingapps.com, where you'll find helpful information for creative entrepreneurs, as well as tutorials and patterns for making stuffed animals and dolls. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.